How does everyone have ADHD, and is it worth conversing about within the context of yoga? Here are 6 tips for yoga teachers to create inclusivity in their classes. And yes, it's worth conversing about. Doctors and health practitioners consistently recommend yoga to patients with ADHD who struggle to manage stress. And since it's common for teachers to do outside research to learn how to accommodate different bodies and brains, but there's still stigma and denial around being neurodivergent. While the first line of treatment for ADHD is medication, for many it's inaccessible or preferable to take only when needed. First, sometimes people try to make lifestyle adjustments like establishing routines, movement, and mindfulness practices that support neuroplasticity. Whether we as teachers choose to respond with understanding can determine if we're creating allyship and inclusivity for our students. Here's the roundup of 6 ways yoga teachers can make their classes more accessible to different bodies and brains. 1. Validation. Resisting the urge to attribute ADHD to an Ayurvedic imbalance, rogue astrological placement, a gluten intolerance, other alternative ideas that will show your student that you're a professional and accepting advocate. Since it's not within the scope of the yoga teacher's practice to diagnose or question the diagnoses of others, talking to students with evidence-based knowledge while putting opinions, anecdotes, and unwarranted advice aside is a big step towards establishing trust. 2. Orient your students. Both humans and animals have a better chance of thriving when we understand where we are in time and space and what's happening around us. This is our proprioception. While it may feel natural to fill the time before class in with small talk, encourage new students to take a moment to walk around and interact with the surroundings in the room. Point out where the restroom is and all the props are, and kindly, if needed, communicate boundaries around tardiness, cell phones, and interruptions. 3. Summarize. Offer a brief and clear breakdown of the class timeline. Teachers often begin with a theme introduced through a chat or story while people are getting settled in. This is also a good chance to just simply say what's going to happen. Here's an example. Today, we're going to use a blanket and the wall to tap into balance and resistance. And we're going to finish up with some deep stretches at the wall and a nice long shavasana with legs up the wall. If at any point you have a question or want the temperature or music volume adjusted, just let me know. This meets the student's need for predictability, and if they find themselves having a moment when they're like, when's this going to end? They'll already have the answer. Number 4, offer props. Options equal freedom. Props can have a pejorative connotation in yoga. Many minimalists look down on them or perceive them as quote-unquote training wheels for beginner students. If this is you, considering using the wall or props as proprioception enhancers, refinement, and inclusivity tools that benefit students at every level. The idea that all you need to practice yoga is yourself is one facet that makes yoga beautiful and accessible to all bodies. But clinging to that idea with rigidity is not necessarily creating an inclusive environment for students. While props offer accessibility through modifications, layers of awareness, support, or just a fidget toy for a neurodivergent person to hold in their hands. Incorporating a prop invites the brain to connect to the inner movement to an outside object, perhaps making it a little easier to focus, like thinking of a candle flame during a guided meditation. Having a physical representation of an idea can be soothing and helpful for students who struggle with attention. Number 5, find alternatives to child's pose. We often suggest Balasana, child's pose, as the place to be in between vinyasas and portions of our class. Many students don't love it or find it restful. For those with knee or hip issues or those who have gas, it may range from uncomfortable to entirely inaccessible. And telling a student that they should feel relaxed without considering these factors in general, it seems like just an honest oversight, but it might be driving our students away. Yoga mats are rectangular, but I promise you your yoga practice doesn't have to be confined to a yoga mat. What if we opened up the possibility of a stroll around the room, a sip of water, a nice cool wall sit, lying down in a restorative bridge pose or a dead bug pose? Thinking outside this rectangular boundary and just giving students the freedom and permission to step away from their space or do something a little different for a couple of poses helps create mutual trust and understanding that not everybody likes to rest or pause in one of two ways or in stillness at all. The last tip, number 6, clean up cues for anyone striving for clear and direct communication in life. If your students struggle to follow sequences, it might be a chance to slow down and simplify. Always use the correct names and pronouns and request consent for hands-on adjustments in your classes. Let's keep working to nurture yoga as a practice that has always been accessible to all brains and bodies by embracing the empathy and non-judgment that attracts many to it in the first place. As an quote-unquote alternative lifestyle practice, many yogis reflect that they don't fit in with the mainstream narratives of our world and how embodiment and movement are defined for us. That's exactly how neurodivergent people feel all the time. I hope we can bridge this gap to create more inclusion and wellness spaces and experience more freedom and acceptance in the beautiful and amazing ways that we can move and think. In a culture that positions women in fear and competition with one another, rather than understanding and shared success, if stigma around neurodivergence isn't improving our teaching skills, isn't helping us reach more students, isn't helping our students develop their practice, and isn't deepening the relationships we already have with our current students, who is it helping?